Hey everybody, welcome to the Song Revolution podcast, brought to you by Nashville Christian Songwriters. Nashville Christian Songwriters exists to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. I'm John Chisholm, and this podcast exists to bring you valuable songwriting insights, inspiration, interviews, and just all around good fun with some of the greatest songwriters, producers, arrangers, artists, and creatives, and beyond. You can find out a whole lot more about us at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. Hi everybody, John Chisholm here for the Song Revolution podcast. And it's going to be a very, very special show today because I'm sitting downtown Nashville at Lifeway Christian Resources, the big megatropolis, with longtime 37-year veteran Christian music publisher Randy Cox. Randy, welcome to the program today.
Thanks a lot, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I don't have time to read Randy's entire resume, but it is one of the most impressive that I've ever seen. And Randy just cut his teeth with some of the greats, Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, and on. And he has been part of producing songs which have been recorded on over 80 million recordings worldwide. Dude, I'm kind of in awe. That's just amazing.
Well, when Barbara Streisand recorded Holy Ground, and it sold 6 million,
there you go.
That was kind of a great place.
There you go. Well, Randy and I have been strong acquaintances, not the closest of friends through the years, but we've done similar things and wound up at all kinds of functions together over the years. But I'm just excited to be digging into the history of your work, and I've just barely touched on it here in this introduction. But you're one of the greats, and we're going to have some great discussion today. You're a poet, of course, a veteran music publisher, and still involved here at Lifeway in listening through songs and working with Mike Harland, who's going to be on another program, and helping still uncover great songs for the church. So I thought maybe today we would just dig into a little bit of the early days and some of the legacy stuff, the great people you've worked with, and maybe some key lessons or things that you've seen, and also how that set us up for where we are today. And then we'll just see where the discussion goes from there. How about that?
Yeah, that's great.
Good.
That's going to be a mouthful for one sitting, but I guess the basic thing is my beginning is church music. My father was a minister of music. I was as well. I majored in music at University of Memphis and directed choirs until 1976, when I had the opportunity to start working for a company that had been started by Bob McKenzie and Bill Gaither and others, but as a record company, and we had the administration of the Gaither catalog. So I was kind of introduced to publishing sink or swim. I guess it was interesting to me because all I knew about publishing per se was that I had some arrangements published and a couple of, compositions, but they're all print. And so Bob McKenzie, if anyone had known Bob McKenzie, would know how incredible a songman he was. He edited Gaither songs. He published songs like He's Alive, Don Francisco, and many, many other things. But he gave me the opportunity to learn the publishing business and basically bring the traditional publishing model of Nashville, anyway, into the Christian music business. At that point, Tree International was the largest music publisher in the world of country music. And I went over and sat in on one of their sessions to see how they worked the songs. What do? You listen to them, you figure out who you're going to pitch it to, you go out and pitch it, and everybody had a responsibility. So what I did was bring that into what I did, and I was the first one in Nashville to do it. So I just applied. I wanted to build a contingent of writers that made up a community that we all cared about what each other did and embellish what each other did. I've always been an independent publisher. Only twice have I been associated with other companies, and it's because I like to work with the writers. I can't lose that connection that I was taught 40 years ago. Of course, in those early days, I was given some rope, but the first thing that was a winner was a friend of mine called and said, would you listen to some songs? There's a guitar player in Dottie Rambo's band named Gary Chapman, and he's got some songs. Would you listen to some of them? Sure, come on over. Well, he comes in and he plays me Father's Eyes, and it was almost like he didn't even need to play me any other songs. They happened to be good, but I was fresh. This is my second year in the music business. I grew up in church, but this was a whole different animal. But I knew that song was special. We did a demo, we gave it to Amy Grant and Brown Bannister, and they recorded it, and it became My Father's Eyes album, which was her first platinum record, and then led to Age to Age. So that was cool. And then also during the Paragon days, and then I'll stop, whatever you want to do. The next year, another friend of mine called and said, hey, there's this kid from West Virginia in town, and he's having a really hard time just personally. And would you listen to his songs? So I said, okay. And his name is Michael Smith. And Michael W. comes in, and he sits down at the piano, and he plays me these melodies to lyrics that were written by somebody else. And I said, I really hate your lyrics, but I really love your melodies. And so I signed Michael W. That year. And then it was Gary and Michael writing together as Amy's preparing for the future career.
That really is very powerful that you were there at the very, very beginning of what has...
I didn't even have an office. Bob McKenzie didn't even give me an office. He gave me a stack of records and said, here's our songs. And I had to go sit on the lounge, the couch in the lobby to work. So anyway.
That's great.
It makes you humble, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know where to begin asking questions about that, because when we look back, I mean, what was that? Was that 35, 37?
Yeah, late 70s.
So just amazing to think back on the Jesus movement that was still just so huge back then, and all of the music that was really being birthed. And here you are at just the convergence of the commercial music thing with the Jesus music that's kind of coming up, and Amy and Michael and Gary and that whole thing. So when did Tree happen? I'm not Tree, Metagreen. Was that part of Tree? And that it was, right?
Yeah. In 81, I had the gall to go across 2 blocks and go to the Tree International building and go upstairs, and the owner and the vice president, and I said, I'd like to start a publishing company with you, which meant I was a partner. The good thing was that Donna Hilley was running the company, but she knew Joe Huffman, and I knew Joe Huffman. And Joe is a fabulous guitar player, producer. He's produced so many records I can't even tell you. But Joe and Donna Hilley had talked about doing something. So we pulled Joe into the picture, and we started Metagreen Music with no songs and 1 writer. And Gary had finished his contract with Paragon. He came over. We signed him as our first writer. In our first demo session, he wrote a song. He demoed a song that became #1 country, top 5 adult contemporary, and in the top 50s on the Billboard 200 in our first demo session.
Wow.
So
what song was that?
It was called Finally. And it was just one of those, it hit that pop side of things, even by a country artist, but it proved in a way, it was a sign to all of us that we had made a good decision, and now we needed to build on that decision by building a staff of writers.
So when I look at just the list of people that have recorded the songs that you've been part of publishing, I'm going to go ahead and take a minute and read a lot of this because it's just phenomenal when you think of, you had a huge hit with Scotty McCreery on the Christmas with Scotty McCreery album. You have songs that you've helped publish recorded by the Imperials, Gaither Trio, Gaither Homecoming, Streisand, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. You're going to have to tell us about that. That's cool. Of course, Smitty, Amy, Barbara Mandrell, Donny Osmond, Sandy Patty, Steve Green, Susan Ashton, Point of Grace, Gladys Knight. Oh, yeah. Alabama, Steve Warner, the Martins, Blackwood Brothers, Truth, For Him, Hearts in Motion, Michael English. We're digging back here some with Farrell and Farrell, Louise Mandrell, Doug Oldham, Larnell Harris, Lee Greenwood, T.G. Shepard, Wayne Watson, Michael Card. I'm going to keep going because this is blessing me. I'm about to have church here. The Choristers Guild, Lorenz Publishing, of course, which was huge. Got to ask you about them. Hal Leonard's, Selah, Natalie Grant, still huge. First Call, Stephen Curtis, Phillips, Craig, and Dean. I was part of helping them get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just lost a little star in my crown, but by even saying that. But I was kind of there in the beginning when those three guys were trying to get deals. And Stan Mosier, Jeff Mosley. So look at the career those guys have had. Of course, you've been talking about Gary Chapman, Preston Wood, Alan Jackson, Avalon, the amazing Rich Mullins. Were you close with Rich?
I signed him to his first deal.
All right, well, let's come back to that because
Yes.
everybody loves Rich. He was just so innovative. Handbell Magazine, European Choral Club, Jamie Owens Collins, just a great artist. Brian Free, just on and on. Art Garfunkel, oh my gosh, just crazy. East to West, big back in the day, and just. My goodness, on and on. We could just pick any of those artists and talk about
it'd be fun
what.
Too.
And that would be
that's another book.
So let's go back to Rich Mullins just for a minute. What was your experience and what was that like? And what do you want to say about Rich?
Well, it's really interesting. Rich, let me go back to the Meadowgreen days. I started with Gary Chapman. The next year, I signed Michael W. He had finished his contract with Paragon as well. So I had Michael W. I had I had Michael W. Smith. Then, through my relationship with Blanton Harrell Management and Reunion Records, we had a co-publishing deal, and they brought this song called "Sing Your Praise to the Lord," and so we signed Rich to his first publishing deal. I was the one who worked with him on a regular basis, going through ideas, editing, collecting, and encouraging, and helping him write in those first 3 years. And that was a really important time. And Michael is growing at the same time. He's writing phenomenal songs like Friends and How Majestic Is Your Name and Great is the Lord and all those. And of course, Age to Age comes along and Sing Your Praise to the Lord's on that, and et cetera. I had between 4 and 7 songs on every gold and platinum Amy Grant record. So it was our writer group. We did it. But Rich was and always remained the quirkiest person, especially songwriter, that I've ever come across. He'd come into my office and he'd pace for a while in front of my desk until we kind of started talking, and then we'd go over to the piano and he'd play me all these ideas that he thought were one song. And it was basically these musical motifs that he always, in virtually every song that you'll hear of Rich, there is an idea, there's a motif, like in classical music, there's a motif that appears throughout. It may change forms, it may come, but it still is there. And that's what he started playing me, were these motifs, which were like left-hand arpeggio kind of things, but they were grooves, they were feels. And so we would try to separate the ones that really needed expression and to finish creating and write lyrics and develop. And some of those never saw the light of day. Some immediately went right on a Debbie Boone record and a Amy Grant record, and then Rich comes into his own. But those were especially good times. I just co-authored a book that's called Rich Mullins' Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth. That is basically, it's spiritual conversations with many people that knew him, that wanted to know him, and were affected by him. And even today, people that were affected by his writing and his prophetic message that he brought. And I always called him he was a pilgrim to me. He was always on a journey, and that journey was growing in faith and trying to figure out who he was internally. But it was the faith part, his increasing knowledge and depth of lyrics that just became profound. A lot of people only know him from maybe Awesome God, but there are so many songs on his records that are true poetry. And that was the idea that I pitched to Worthy Books, was that Rich Mullins is the finest poet of our generation. If you strip down, take the music away, if you just read it as poetry, it's profound. And I've been fortunate enough, I represent 11 Rich Mullins songs that have never been heard. And 4 of the lyrics will be in this new book. Reunion is working on a radio single, multi-artist radio single for one of the songs. Awesome. And so there's a lot of things going, but we want to extend his heart because it deserves to be. Mm-hmm. Another great writer, a lot of people don't know unless they're really involved in church music, Lowell Alexander.
Yes.
And Lowell is, again, profound writer. He was an English teacher who decided he really needed to do something with it. But he happened to open for a Rich Mullins concert in near Atlanta. And Rich brought him to my office and said, "You need to listen to him." And here we are, even 20 years after his death, Lowell finished these 11 songs that Rich left unfinished. So it's come back so many times over those years, what Rich brought, what he did for other people. Chris Tomlin and Matt Maher and Amy Grant and everybody are writing and have been interviewed for this book. And I think it really excites me because it will show the depth of of himself.
Right, kind of like a Keith Green legacy, just a profound impact that one life has on not only one generation, but on subsequent generations.
Absolutely. Keith Green, of course, unfortunately had a much shorter writing period. But, and of course, Rich was killed in that tragic accident 20 years ago this year. But the songs remain. And the same thing with Keith. Those songs they're the good ones. They're the ones that move your heart.
Just to see the longevity, Awesome God, alone, despite putting on the Ritz.
That's why nobody puts it in the hymnals. They don't want to do the verses.
I know, but the chorus, just so fantastic, of course. And so this book that you've co-authored is coming out in this year, 2017?
It'll be out in August. I'm actually going to pick up a preview copy today.
Great.
Andrew Greer, who writes for CCM magazine and has book published, and he's a great writer. He and I co-authored this, and he did video interviews with a lot of the people who who are represented in the interviews written in the book.
Right. Did you see the Rich Mullins movie a couple of years ago?
I didn't want to.
Okay. All right.
I being that close to someone, I don't want to see. I knew him enough to know that it was unique and quirky and difficult and all the rest. But I couldn't watch the movie. I couldn't see it. But Lowell tells one story that we can tell. Lowell lived with Rich and a couple of other people here in town in kind of a cabin out in the woods. And Lowell tells the story. He and Rich were driving down the highway in Nashville, and they were just driving along chatting. They stopped at a light, and out Rich's passenger window, he sees this guy with his windows rolled up, and he's smoking a cigarette, and the whole car is like filled with smoke, and he keeps puffing and he keeps puffing, and Rich starts doing all this, I'm choking through the, pantomiming the guy. He's smoking, he's gonna kill us all, give him the skull and crossbones, the whole deal. I mean, really gave him a slashing. And he turned to Lowell, who was driving, and he said, "That was Jesus, wasn't it?" And to me, it's as if that could be taken in any context of any life by anyone. We look at somebody, we look at what they're doing, we look at who they are, and immediately we see something negative. But we need to be remembering, see Jesus in everybody. And that's profound to me.
That is profound. So out of all these people, all these amazing people, and all these amazing songs, what do you think, or do you know, what would be the biggest song you've ever been part of?
Boy, this is tough. Can I do my top 5?
Yeah, sure.
Friends, Via Dolorosa, Was It a Morning Like This, People Need the Lord, Thy Word, and then on and on. And I know that's a long time ago, but I remember the effect that the songs had on people. Everyone wanted an anthem of it, or they wanted to sing it as a solo. They wanted to use them, and that was the component that I published for the church. My concept was we had a great song, went out, made a difference in people's lives, then let's give it to them in every form: children's choir, youth choir, adult choir, handbells, whatever the case may be, to saturate the church with everything they need to sing that song by anybody in their church. And those songs are especially powerful for me. I felt like with songs that were great, they can go out and affect people's lives like many other sermons and books and whatever else, more than they can. So I've always felt that, and I still feel that. After all these years, the love of my life is to sit down with a songwriter and go over the song and find the good parts, fix the parts that aren't good, and maybe even shift the thing around. It could just be a puzzle piece. You lose the bridge, or the bridge becomes the chorus, or whatever the case may be. But theologically, I think it's the most important thing that we say things that are true to Scripture. And I've been hardest on writers over these years with their lyrics than anything else, and I beat myself up on anything I write too. So it's just important. It has to be right.
Well, okay, and that's great. I totally agree with that. And I would have to say the same about myself. It's always 90% or more lyric, and focusing in on that. But before we go into that, because I really do want to talk about the difference between poetry and lyrics here in a few moments. But before we get there, I'd like to, it's easy to look back on such an amazing legacy, and not only yourself, as powerful and amazing as your career has been and is still amazing. I think it's easy to look back, maybe for some of us, and say those were the golden years, or that was, and it was a very, very special time. But maybe talk a little bit about where we are now, where you see songwriting, the publishing industry, and then from there, maybe we could talk about some tips for the songwriters who are listening to this podcast. But, kind of moving on a little bit from the legacy side, where do you see things now, and what is your current involvement, and maybe a little bit of the landscape of today?
Yeah. Well, I can certainly agree with the point of saying the golden years. The golden years were the 80s, 90s. When we get to 2000, we still have some. We still have Phillips, Gregg, and Dean, and we still have Point of Grace, and we have whatever the case may be. But then it all changed, and it became writing worship songs. That was basically it. There were songs like Third Day, and many other artists that came out with songs that were really radio.
Well, Smitty himself really kind of blazed that trail, didn't he, with his first worship album?
Well, that's true. And where it started was back with How Majestic Is Your Name and Great Is the Lord. And so he's continued. He's the most durable and iconic person to perpetuate where he was starting in those days, writing worship songs for his church. Then there came another movement in the last 15 years that weren't keyboard driven like Michael's things were, and Rich's things were too, but they were guitar driven, very singable, trying to be as memorable as possible, trying to write good songs that were surface lyrics. And I like to look at things as if you take a line and take a line out of Scripture and you use that as your hook, and then you write to that, you better write something deeper about that lyric, about that psalm or whatever the case may be. Or you can just copy the psalm and basically pull from other psalms and make your own song. And that's what I call surface writing. It doesn't take a depth of prayer and knowledge and theology to write those songs. They have however, become gigantic, and so some of the publishers have made extraordinary amount of money through CCLI because the church sings the songs, and it is a new generation we're in right now. It's a lot of what I call I probably shouldn't even be saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The entertainment value overshadows the content and the reverence and really listening to the heart of God. I think we have a tendency to jump to our feet and raise our hands because we got excited. And light shows, I don't think Jesus likes light shows. Now, I can't speak for Jesus, and
I love that.
But it ain't you too, So I personally prefer worship where it is reverent, not a lot of distractions, and I don't have to be involved. I can sit down. If everybody else is standing up, I don't have to get up. But when you're demanded to join in the celebration and join in the dancing in the aisles, I have a little problem with that. So forgive me, everybody that does that.
So where do you see you just mentioned a little bit that, and I deal with the same thing with my clients and all the people coming through Nashville Christian Songwriters. It's pretty amazing because everybody really wants to write for the church, and it feels like so many people are imitating what's going on, and it is worship light in some ways, of course, missing a lot of the reverence. Although I think there are some admirable writers out there, of course.
There are. There's some great songs.
The Gettys, of course, etc. But as far as just I hate to say average, but the aspiring songs or songwriters out there that are basically imitating Bethel or Jesus Culture or some of those kind of ministries, not to pick on anybody, because I love parts of everything. But I don't know, what would you say to a songwriter wanting to go deeper in their worship writing?
Well, I think you've got to stay away from believing that every one of the dominant worship writers, that everything they write is going to be absolutely perfect, authentic, scriptural, no questions asked, just sing it. No one writes everything at a certain level every time. So we have a lot of sound-alikes that people are trying to be writing in their own worship setting, in their own church, but they don't have anybody to bounce it off of. And they really, in a lot of these, the situation of passion and whatever else, you're in a mini denomination. So basically everything you write is going to be within the movement. And I think there has to be an accountability. And that's what I fear most for writers, that they don't have accountability. The congregation is not necessarily going to, scrutinize the lyrics. They're going to sing along and whatever. But there have been great songs, Chris Tomlins and Paul Baloche and et cetera, just on and on. Really, really good writers. I worked with Keith Getty when he first started coming over from Ireland every year. I helped him with his lyrics. I would edit his lyrics for him, and so we got close together in those days. But that was fun. I think people that want to be involved in the worship music scene need to write where they are. They need to write about their personal, deep experience, not trying to be a CCLI star. The people that are major in the worship community, writing community, have been there and done that and created roads. But for people to just copy that, there's really no place for it unless you want to subject your congregation to that.
Right.
I think you just got to write at a level of learning to rewrite your own song. The rewriting process is key, and I have said this for 40 years. I don't believe a writer can really be a great writer unless they learn how to rewrite. They have to learn to rewrite. You have to be able to look objectively at your own work, especially if you don't have a publisher or you don't have anyone to guide you along the way. You have to be able to build into yourself a system that makes you step back from what you have and rewrite what doesn't really fit. And usually it's second verse. But whatever it is, you have to learn to rewrite and be willing to move things around like puzzle parts. It may look good at the beginning. It may be okay in the beginning. But if you move this and you move that and you add that and you extend that, then you may have something that you never dreamed of.
Yeah, when I worked with Gaither for a lot of years, I remember he would say, and I'm thinking this is original to him, it might not be, but one of the quotes I attribute to him is that with a rewrite, a good song can become a great song, and with a rewrite, a great song can become a classic.
Yeah.
And so I've always attributed that to him, but I think the principle stands no matter who said it.
I agree.
Right?
That's probably where I got it. But I don't even think I ever heard Bill say it. But by the same token, working with him and Bob McKenzie in those early days, learning to look at a song for what it really is and see where it needs to be fixed.
Right.
It's vital.
I agree. It's great. And the other thing that Bill would say, whenever I would play a song for him, would be like, well, who's going to care about this song 100 years from now? Mm-hmm. And so I'd pose the question to you of everything that's out there and I didn't prep you for the question. But,
oh, boy.
But I think you'll probably know the answer pretty much. But, of all the songs in the landscape, What do you have one or two, three songs that you think might still be around 100 years from now?
Yes, but I'm not going to name them. I believe there are, but another movement that has been growing over the last 5, 6, 7 years is bringing hymns, classic hymns from our past, back into the church, and then creating maybe a new section that hopefully adapts well and fits well with what you've taken out, or just be good as what the hymn is. Mm-hmm. And there again is the poetry aspect of it. The classic hymns that we all know in every hymnal are poetry, whether they're written in a King James or they're written in a common vernacular. They stay there and they're used generation after generation because they have value. They have theological value. They have integrity. Mm. So that's one thing I've seen coming is this turn to hymnody. After that, I don't know what's going to happen. Mm. I think not a lot of the worship songs will be in use. And I think there's more than 3. I think there's several dozen. But the next phase to me, the church wants meat. They want not just repetition and not just, I always use this, a dumb melody. Challenge the people, get them to take them as far as they want to go. If it's too hard, they'll tell you. If they don't sing, something wrong. Mm. And changing keys or making it louder doesn't make any better.
Well, you are a published composer as well, lyricist, poet. You've had anthems and musicals published by Hope, Lorenz, Hal Leonard, Word, Lifeway, Brentwood Benson, Choristers Guild, Oxford University Press. That's so cool. And so tell us a little bit about, we talked earlier about the difference between, or we mentioned the difference between poetry and lyrics. So let's move into a little bit of that discussion. And then I do want you to share whatever you'd like of your poetry. You've been published by the Mertens Society, which is amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
So talk a little bit from your perspective about the difference between poetry and lyric.
And I think there's a lot of people don't understand the difference. There are a lot of poets. Everybody's a poet, and everybody's a songwriter. So you have to look at that in its overall perspective. Everybody can write a good song. Their mother loves it. Their church loves it. Everybody's a poet. It's just there's so much of songs and so much of poetry out there. Who's to say something's good in their world, or in whether it's a journal that's publishing poetry or not? But the key, as far as I'm concerned, when I write a text for a choral piece, I have to write with a concise form in mind. You have to be careful in your rhymes. You have to have a lot of theology, but you still simply have an ABA form, and we'll call the bridge C. Some people have a channel or pre-chorus, whatever. So there can be a lot of components. With poetry, you can do anything you want to. You don't have to have a form. It doesn't have to go back to the chorus, because there's probably no chorus.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what, to me, that's been really liberating. That I can write ideas to their fullest that I can, with no restrictions of having to rhyme, having to be a certain form, having to have very specific ideas condensed. You get a chance to, dream and dig deeper rather than having a certain form. Some people do write in certain forms. That's where the classics always come from. But I am of the opinion that I like to read poetry that it's almost song-like. You can almost you can almost find a melody in the flow of the poem. It's fascinating. It doesn't have to have music, but I like when it sings to me.
Who are your favorite poets?
Oh my goodness. I love the poetry of Thomas Merton. I don't understand most of it, but that's why I read it, because I want to be challenged by it. And I really like his things. A dear friend of mine is a Trappist monk at the monastery where Thomas Merton was, Gethsemane Abbey. He has many, many books published, and he is one of my favorites. And then there's another poet named Morris Manning, and his is some of the most brilliant writing I've ever seen. And he was the runner-up for the Pulitzer Prize in poetry. And I had a chance to write a poem for him. He had a newborn daughter, and so I wrote one for him. And then, of course, I dedicated it to my daughter too, and that was fun.
So we're talking about the difference between poetry and lyric. And can you name a few things? I mean, you just named it, that in poetry you can do anything you want. In lyrics, you have to be stricter?
Absolutely.
More strict. And
you are confined.
Yes, you are confined.
You have to have a verse and a chorus. I mean, people, period, if they're going to sing, they want you to tell them something in the verse, but then they want the chorus to be the payoff. Mm-hmm. And in poetry, you want every line to be a payoff.
Oh, that's good.
And to follow the course of where this is leading. I don't have it right here, but I wrote one a few months ago called, what was it called? Come on now.
Don't you hate that?
Oh, I hate it.
It's like learning a new song that you just wrote. You always have to learn it.
It's called, Streams of Consciousness. I think that's what it was. And it basically took a journey down from a place where a river starts and where it evolves and it goes past to so-and-so and it does this and it's affected this way and it's challenged this way. And then in the end, the stream goes into the ocean and actually fulfills its mission. That's what I like. Where you really, you have an idea and you follow it and you get to the end of it and you go, yeah. It's like a great song.
Yeah.
But without form.
But do you have a couple of your poems that you can share with us? Or do you write in short form, long form, free verse, I imagine, but...
Yeah, it's pretty free. It'll have, I write in usually in like stanzas. A lot of times I write in 3 and 5 instead of the regular 4s. I don't know, I feel that. A lot of are, just for like stanzas. The longest one I've written was like a page and a half. I like to get kind of the short form things. I'll read you the one that was in the International Merton Journal. Merton's Hermitage, for those that don't know, he lived the last few years of his life in a building separate from the monastery. It was up about a quarter of a mile up the hill, and it was his own place. It was just concrete blocks and heaters and the rest. But it was his place where he wrote, and I got to spend a whole day there one day. And this basically shows you where I was. This is in the International Thomas Merton Society Journal. Dawn breaks silently upon stands of oaks and slender pines, now older and closer to heaven. This place of grace is old and new, suited well for saint or sinner. Ground is holy, shoes allowed. Morning glories, chanting breezes, wakened echoes of distant knobs, lauding lake, flowers in God array, solitary, still, spring up at Mertens Place. Always Mertens Place. That was that one.
Wow, that's beautiful. Marvelous alliteration, just the whole. For me, poetry is about evoking a sense, evoking some kind of emotion or a sense of a place or an experience, even in forms such as haiku, in the 5-7-5 format. I think the most successful poets evoke an image and a sense of a feeling and emotion in very, very concise ways. And you just did that. I've never been to Mertens Place, but yet I love that. I don't want to misquote it, but the place is holy, shoes allowed.
Yeah.
That is a great line. Love that, Randy.
Yeah, that was so funny. It goes along with the saints and sinners. But yeah, thank you.
It's nice. Yeah, very nice.
There's one that I really like that I wrote for Morris Manning, remarkable poet. His daughter had just been born, and I wrote it for my youngest daughter as well. But I sent this to him, and he said, as soon as she's old enough to understand it, I'll read it to her. So it's called Walk Across the Sun. And this is for my daughter, Jamie. Only a father, absorbed, saturated with love for a daughter, would walk across the sun at her request or simple desire. Only a father would climb a ladder to the moon to fetch a lost doll or a misplaced sock or shoe. There is nothing in heaven or earth can separate the falling from the being in love, as only a father knows.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I'm the father of one child, a daughter, and I resonate with that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
There are two sides to every particular coin, and the songwriting coin. One side is, do you want to write for radio? Do you want to write for recording artists? Do you want to write for choral piece? Do you want to write for whatever? The other side is writing from your heart and doing the best you can and learning rewriting. And then coming to John, this is a plug for Nashville Christian Songwriters.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Because there are very few people anymore that will listen to an unknown writer unless it's someone asks you to, or whatever the case may be. But places like what John is doing they're vital because they give you information you cannot buy. You can't buy that. History teaches you more things than anybody is writing a worship song about today. We have seen together, co-writing at its finest, great songs, millions of records, millions of songs sung for millions out there across the world. Those songs live on, and they always will. Mm-hmm. But go to everything that you can go to, listen to everybody that you can, but be yourself. Do not copy anybody. You can learn from, but you can't copy. I want to keep learning so that I can do write a better lyric or write a better poem.
Right.
We have to grow. We have to grow ourselves. Nobody else is going to bring you to the trough and feed you.
Dude, that is great. And one of the things that I harp on my clients and in all our social media, everything we're doing is to resource yourself. And I think that one of the big mistakes writers make is they feel like they ought to be able to sit down with a blank computer screen and write out of nothing. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to write on empty. So I really admire your attitude of just being a lifelong learner and continuing to feed yourself and write just because you're a writer and not because you have your eye on the goal of getting published, which is an amazing privilege, which is something that so many people I deal with, aspire to. But thank you for sharing, from the depths of who you are today, Randy. It's just been amazing.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I'll put a plug in for John, because there are very few places a songwriter can get an audience, and John has done some really wonderful work with labels and publishers that I have admired and listened to for a long time, and to continue doing this is just wonderful. I think it's, again, just wrapping up, this whole idea of feeding yourself. Don't just go by the new greatest hit Christian book that just came out. Go back further. Dig down into places you've never even thought about going, and then write about things you never thought about writing. But start with a point of concept. If you're going to start a concept, like a title, it may not be, who knows, the title may change. But write something that you're going to try to fulfill that concept. The first verse is going to say so-and-so. The chorus is going to embellish that and bring that into your mind and blazon that in your mind. Verse 2 has got to hold up, and it leads you either back to the chorus, which is normal, or it goes to a bridge. And don't write a bridge for bridge's sake. I throw out more bridges than you can imagine. It's because it's superfluous. It has no commentary. It has no connection to take you back to the chorus. So, read, study, come back, rewrite. Read, study, come back and rewrite. But mainly listen to God's voice with the ears of your heart, because out of his voice, out of his Holy Spirit, come ideas, concepts, and faith.
Well, that's very rich. And again, to be sitting here with someone who has had has published songs that have gone out on 80 million records is just astounding, Randy. And it's a privilege to sit at your feet a little bit today and to
please edit that part.
No, but seriously, I mean, to think of the legacy that you have with amazing people that we mentioned earlier in the program, and then to see that you're continuing to try to bring depth and great songs for the church is just an honor to have been with you today. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
My privilege. So we've been talking with Randy Cox, who is currently has his own publishing company, and also works here with Lifeway Music, and is still impacting the world with great songs. So tune in next time. We're going to get more great artists. We have great writers, publishers, industry professionals coming up on the Song Revolution podcast. And remember, we're all about making a difference. Come and join the Song Revolution. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here today for the Song Revolution podcast from Nashville Christian Songwriters. We exist to empower you and to bring you some of the greatest inspiration, insights, and important people from the Christian music world to help you write your best and to be heard as the songwriter that you were born to be. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us over on Twitter and Instagram, and connect with us through our Facebook group called Successful Christian Songwriters. Until next time, I'm John Chisholm calling you to a Song Revolution.